Hey, so here we have the Epson Projector. I actually inherited this from a guy at work. He put it in the hard rubbish. It was, he'd had enough of it and he'd upgraded to something newer. And he kindly passed it on to me, but he did say that it had a bit of a problem, and that was when you power it on. I'm not sure if it's a common fault or anything like that, but when you power it on, it seems to be in sort of a temperature protect mode and the power light flashes, so hopefully it does it now. So it's flashing green. Oh, it seems to work this time. Okay, so a bit of an intermittent fault with this one. See if we'll do it this time. That seems okay again. That's a bit annoying. So let's try powering it up. Okay, so we've got the overtemperature warning light flashing, which is ridiculous because I've just pulled it out of storage. So for some reason it must be getting some sort of signal that it's too hot in there. So just looking at the underside now, I've taken off the cover for the bulb, taken out the filter, so there's quite a few screws here. They all seem to be the same size so far. So just undone a few screws here in the back. Hopefully get this cover off. Okay, so just unplug that one. Alright, gives us a pretty good view of the main board. So looking at the motherboard, it looks like there's one temperature sensor and 4 fans. A lamp fan, power supply fan, EX fan, which might be on the exit of the lamp. Another one over here, LV fan. I'm not too sure where that goes. Just trying to figure out how to get the top cover off. It looks like it's pretty involved to get all these screws undone. It might be easier to access things by taking this motherboard out. I did read somewhere that what can go wrong is some of these fans can seize up, and you can see there's 3 wires. There's the power connection and also a signal that comes back, which will give them the main board here the fan speed. If one of these fans aren't spinning up to speed, the motherboard's not going to get that signal and flag an error. So not because of the temperature, but basically because the fans failed. So what I might do is try to access all of these fans and just have a look at them, maybe power them up on the bench and see if there's a faulty one in there or an intermittent one, which might be stopping it from starting up. It's just how to get to them is going to be the challenge. So what I'm doing is I'm just going through each individual fan, powering it up off the power supply, just to make sure there's no obvious faults, that it's, you know, spinning up, just like so. I won't show all of them, but I've gone through all the fans and they seem alright, so I don't think it's any of those. So I think the next step will be to take the whole motherboard out, have a look underneath. I know there's a few mechanical switches and sliders and motors and things like that can cause this similar sort of problem, so I think that'll be the next thing to check out. Now, unit's unplugged, of course. I'm just going to go around and unplug everything. Come out pretty easy. Just have to be especially careful with these ribbon cables. So very carefully just pop up these little black tabs on the ribbon cables. They should slide out with zero force. There you go. Okay, so one right down here. There's another one just down here as well. Okay. Now that's out of the way, we can have a bit of a closer look in here. So reading through some forums, there's a few points of interest here. There's a few things worth checking out, and that's this optical sliding mechanism, which runs off this little geared motor down here. It has a couple of limit switches here, micro switches, so apparently that motor is prone to fail. The whole mechanism is prone to give trouble, so I might just do a quick continuity test on these switches to make sure that they're closed in the limit position. So I assume that one's supposed to be closed and this one's meant to be open. Yep. And I'll just try running that motor. I think I need to run it backwards in this position, so I've just got that running at around 5 volt. So that's all the way to the other limit. So this switch should be open. This one should be closed. Not close, so maybe we haven't hit the limit. That might be better. That's closed. It's still open. Just to be sure, we'll go back. Couldn't get quite a really good connection there, that's why it seemed a bit dodgy, but that should be open now. That should be closed. So it's not that. Now the other point of interest is this iris control mechanism. I think that's some sort of stepper motor. Might seize up, or it looks like the grease down there is a little bit hard. So maybe it's not very well lubricated anymore. Just trying to spin the motor a bit and see if it does anything. Yeah, so I can manually open and close the iris. I guess there's some sort of must be a sensor or limit switch, hall sensor perhaps. Can't really see where that's going, but I'm assuming that when you power it up it's going to recalibrate itself and seat itself, so not really sure what I can do in here. So I've checked the slider, I've just repositioned the stepper motor to see if that triggers some sort of recalibration when it's powered up next. I might just put it back together and see if we have any change in behaviour. So that's mostly reassembled temporarily. Power it up. See what it does. So I've still had the same problem after the disassembly, reassembly and just the checks. Now one thing I did sort of skip past a bit earlier on was the temperature sensors. So what I actually thought was a temperature sensor was not, and there's two, and they're actually LMP-TH and LV-TH. So now unfortunately I didn't get it on camera, but I've actually disassembled and accessed those temperature sensors, so we can have a closer look at them and how to measure them and make sure they're functioning sort of within their limits, because these are also known to cause the same sort of problem. So to gain access to the lamp temperature sensor, you need to remove the whole power supply. It's pretty straightforward. There's just a few screws and you can lift the whole unit out, and that allows you to undo the screw and lift out the temperature sensor board here. I'll take a closer look at that in a second. The other temperature sensor is actually buried deep under here, under the motherboard, in the LCD sort of region. You can actually see here that it's just hanging out because I've pulled that out, and I can show you where that seats when I reassemble it. But we'll take a closer look at one of these and see what you should be measuring. Okay, so here's a closer view of one of the temperature sensors. You can see there's 4 pins, basically just a little NTC which is pinned out to pins 3 and 4. Pin 1 and 2, it's basically just a loop back, so I'm assuming that that's just detecting presence of the sensor. I can't think of any other reason why that would be there. So if you look up the chart for NTC, assuming it's a 10K NTC, we should see somewhere around there at room temperature. So let's measure it up right on the NTC itself. Now it's important that you measure the NTC out of circuit, otherwise you won't actually get the true resistance. But you can see here it's around 9K. It's pretty toasty in here today, so I think that's about right. Now, what I was seeing when I would measure pin 3 and 4 of the temperature sensor by unplugging it here and measuring at those little exposed bits there, this guy was seeing the right sort of measurement, but this one I was seeing basically an open circuit. Now since pulling it out and disconnecting the connector, connecting it again, I haven't been able to see that sort of reading again, so my feeling is perhaps it's some sort of bad connection in there, or perhaps the NTC itself has gone bad or intermittent. So what I might try now is just powering it up with these floating around and see if we have a bit of luck. That's good. Let's try it again. And again that's good. So that's really pointing to these temperature sensors. Actually, putting the two sensors next to each other, you can see the one that usually sits next to closer to the lens is actually much darker than the other. That's the one that I suspect's intermittent anyway. So what I'm going to do is, when I reassemble it, I'm just going to swap them around. Just because that one's quite difficult to access. This one's quite a bit easier to access, so that means if I have trouble in the future, I can get to it a little bit easier. But I might just go through and touch up the solder joints in case it's just a case of and dry cracked solder joint that's opening up and closing as the projector's going through the temperature cycles. So we'll give that a crack. So I'm a big fan of flux when working with these tiny devices, so I'll just put a few drops on there. You don't want to cake the board in it. But usually really helps with the flow of the solder. Alright, we'll give them a bit of a clean and yeah, reassemble the whole thing. So there's a closer view of the temperature sensor near the fan. Back in its original location with the power supply removed. So the location of the other temperature sensor is right in here, buried pretty deep. It's going to be a bit of a challenge to get it back in there, I think. Finally, that was a battle, but that's back into position. Okay, I might just give it a quick clean while it's open and yeah, put it back together. So I've had the projector sort of temporarily pieced together for a while now, and it's done maybe 10-15 power cycles without any issue now. So it's sort of pointing to the temperature sensor. I've actually got it currently hooked up to one of my old PCs. Actually pretty impressed with the image. Oh, I mean, it's certainly not HD or anything like that, but certainly great setup to muck around with yeah, some of the old PCs, and I mean, it's got HDMI on there, so it'd probably make a good projector anyway. So yeah, not sure how I'll make use of this at the moment, but it certainly seems like that error's gone away. So yeah, saved a projector from hard rubbish at least.